Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 38.
38.
And just for clarity, this is our second go at episode 38 because we spent about 2 hours talking a couple of days ago. And then Nick sent me a text yesterday saying that the entire thing had been corrupted or through the recording. So
the audio, just the audio.
But we were talking about all sorts of stuff off track. So we're not going to be able to replicate that.
No.
And there was some fantastic stuff there. Probably the best stuff we've ever done, Nick. So it's a shame you guys are going to miss all that. But we're just going to try and have a catch up a little bit in this. So this is episode 38 again of The Mayor and I, with me, Lindsay Khan, and Nick Buckley, MBE. Please give us a thumbs up and comments and subscribe. Nearly
at 14,000 now. I think we're like 12 subscriptions away from 14,000.
Wow. So if there's 12 people out there who haven't subscribed, can you subscribe immediately? Welcome, Nick. How
Cheers.
are you? Nice to see you. And today is what day is it today? The 3rd of September or 4th? I'm not idea. It's a Thursday.
Yeah.
Thursday the 4th.
Who knows?
4th of September. So we're going to be covering things that we were meant to be covered a few days ago, but there's a whole load of stuff that's kind of racked up. So I'm going to repeat some of the stuff we talked about. Basically, so first before Nick mentions it, Man United lost 3-0 to Liverpool at the weekend. I didn't go, even though technically there's 8 ways I can go to that match. I didn't go, and I'm glad I didn't go because we started off as badly as we last season. The worst thing is that Liverpool, City are doing really well.
But Liverpool at home, I'd rather City beat us than Liverpool.
Yeah. No, I mean, a proper Man United fan never wants Liverpool to beat us. We're not a City, whilst irritating, are just nowhere near where the threat that Liverpool are to United. So it was a particularly bad day. Second thing is that you've now got, as you said, you've got now nearly 13,000... 14,000. Oh, 14,000, that's very good. Yeah. 14,000 subscribers on YouTube. How many have you got on Twitter?
It's nearly 40,000 now.
Wow. And I forgot to mention last time. Am I allowed to mention the name of a very famous person who started to follow you?
Yes. So,
a very famous person who started to follow Nick on Twitter is the one and only George O'Dowd. Is it George Dowd, otherwise known as Boy George?
Yeah.
And what does that mean, Nick?
I have no idea.
That he's anti-woke and anti-communist just like you, or just what does it mean? Has he said anything?
No, it just popped up that he's following me. I clicked on it thinking this can't be the real Boy George, and it was. He had something like 500,000 followers.
Wow.
And so I don't know if he must have seen something and followed me because of that. I have no idea on his views on many things. I just know my mum loves him, by the way.
Yeah.
But I know he's very opinion. He's got opinions on everything.
Yeah.
So we'll find out over the course of the next few months.
No, I like Boy George. I always like Boy George. He's a controversial figure, and he's got a criminal record for doing some funny stuff with people as well, hasn't he? Didn't he keep somebody in a dungeon or something like that?
I don't know.
But that's great news. But sorry, going back to my main point, talking about famous people, you have got some competition on YouTube now. Because Ronaldo, the footballer, who you may or may not know, I'm sure you do, he joined YouTube about 2 weeks ago, and he hit 50 million subscribers in 6 days, which is a new YouTube record. So there's a bit of competition there, Nick. I'm just warning. People will be hovering between Ronaldo and you when they're looking for that subscription. Just to let you know.
My only worry is maybe he needs the money. Maybe it's like, to his wife, my football's coming to an end. I better go on YouTube and start getting subscribers.
So. I think the 50 million he's paid a year by the Saudis isn't enough. I think he needs a little bit more. And just a little thing I was very pleased with, and I mentioned his name, but you didn't know him. Sam Kidd. He's a very famous actor from the 40s and 50s. I got his autograph this week, so I'm thrilled with that. That's like a personal highlight. And I think what we were talking about last time, I was saying part of the reason I like actors like Sam Kidd, I collect autographs of people, movie stars or whatever from the 50s and 60s, but I think part of the reason I like Sam Kidd, he represents a time for me of innocence, of when I feel things were better, and and I mentioned this to you last time, it feels those times, the 50s and 60s, 70s, the things we're seeing now and things you and I are talking about and getting angry about didn't seem to exist. There seems to be the world seemed a more libertarian place in that time, and I think I asked you the question: is this just me looking through rose-tinted spectacles, or were things better then?
Some things were better, some things were worse. So, and you are looking back through rose-tinted spectacles, because our childhoods, our teens, early 20s are always the best times of everyone's life, because you're going into adulthood, you're experimenting, the world is your oyster, you can achieve anything you think you can achieve. But some of the things were better then, such as community, such as family. Families lived in the same couple of streets, all next to each other, so you knew everybody. Our families now, some families now are spread across the world. So if it wasn't for technology, you'd never speak to them. That distance makes people more unhappy. People say from the 50s and 60s, I used to be able to leave my front door and back door unlocked. There was no crime. There was plenty of crime. You weren't burgled because you had nothing worth stealing, so you could leave your doors unlocked. Things like polio, diseases, poverty, malnourishment, they were things in the 40s and 50s, not a thing now. But then we look at things now that are worse. Lack of community, lack of family involvement, lack of personal responsibility. How many men don't have contact with their children? How many children are being brought up in single parent households? That damages children, damages relationships. So there's lots of things that were better then, but also things that were worse. And then flip that, there's things that are better now, but there's so many things that are worse now as well. So it depends how you judge. Was that a better era? What was your matrix? And how are you awarding points for these things?
Well, I think I'm kind of looking at it through the prism of what I'm interested in now, I suppose. And what I'm interested in now is free speech, liberty, the rights, civil liberties, or the infringement of civil liberties. And I don't seem to remember in my youth, and I'll go from I was born in the 60s, but let's go forward into the 70s and the 80s. I don't remember there being a climate of fear like there is now in terms of people being able to speak their minds. And interestingly, I was going to say this for our next podcast, which would have been the next, but I was reading an article about, they did a survey of students, and basically they're saying, university students, the percentage, I can't remember it, I was going to print off the article and bring it. The percentage now, something like 40 or 50% of you are scared to speak their minds about immigration, about other things in university. And I don't remember a university in the 80s being scared of speaking my mind at all. I don't really remember. And if anything, we were encouraged then to be vocal, to go and protest and all those sort of things. And not necessarily protest now, and we've talked about this before, where protests seem to happen. People go on what we call safe protests, where we'll go, well, I'll go on this protest and I'll be with everybody else and I'm on the right side, so nobody's going to give me a hard time. I think even then we would go on protests against things that potentially were not uncomfortable, but weren't particularly worried about it. It wasn't, so I didn't feel as inhibited as I am now in terms of expressing my opinions about various things. So I think I'm probably looking at it through the prism of that as more than anything else.
So we go back to the 60s, that was when protest really started, especially at universities. And you could also say that was when we started becoming more individualised as well. So acceptance of breaking down gender roles in society, acceptance of homosexuality, all these things came out of protest, demonstrations, the public wanting more freedom of individual choice. There was no issue of freedom of speech, then you could basically say what you wanted to say. The same people, the same ideology that created that room, I'm not saying these things led to where we are now, so I don't know if these things were good things or bad things, that's a different discussion. But the people and the ideology that wanted to break down the patriarchy and wanted to break down heteronormative whatever they are in society are the same people now who won those battles, got those freedoms for individuals, and they're now taking away people's right to freedom of speech.
Yes.
So that's
interesting, yeah.
They used their freedom of speech in the 60s and 70s to fight for minorities and fight for what they felt were social constraints on them and how they wanted to live.
Yeah.
But the second they got into power, which they are now because all the elites are left-wing, all the organisations, all our institutions, they've won that war. Now that they're in the position of power now, they're now taking away freedom of speech from other people because they know that's how they won their battles in the first place.
Oh, I see. So what you're saying is it's a deliberate approach to take away the freedom of speech that gave them the ability to overthrow things.
Absolutely.
Because
they know the power of free speech.
Yeah. Because it's interesting because we've recently seen the anti-racist protests. Mm. Now those protests are not against the government. Mm. Those protests are basically endorsed and supported by the government now, aren't they? The anti-racist... By
everybody.
Yes, by everybody.
By Coca-Cola, by all the multinationals, by the BBC, by the Arts Council, by all the museums. Yeah. Can you find someone who doesn't support anti-racist demonstrations? It's the most pointless marches that ever happened because I can't find anyone who actually says, you know what, I'm a racist and proud.
Yeah.
Nobody is a racist. Nobody wants to be a racist. Correct. Nobody wants to be called a racist.
I think even racists don't think they're racist. I think genuinely a so-called racist. But the protests that we did at university in the 80s were anti-government protests, anti-poll tax,
anti-Thatcher
clause. Do you remember the gay clause, clause 28? We used to go out and clause 28. Anti-Thatcher. We were anti-government, anti-establishment. Now the marches are the establishment. Yeah. That's what's bizarre. Don't you think?
The marches and demonstrations now are nearly always in support of government policy.
Yeah.
They pretend. Well, they don't pretend. Their complaint is the government policy is not left enough.
Yeah.
But the policies are the right policies for them.
Yeah.
They just want them to do more with that policy.
Yeah.
They're
supporting the government, saying, "Can you do a little bit more though on this particular ideology?" So the pro-Palestinian marches, the government's just stopped sending arms to Israel, hasn't it? So it's like, oh, okay, so it's all working then. Everything's fine. We're all in harmony, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're going out and marching every weekend. We're doing all this, but actually the government's also supporting us as well. So we'll just carry on doing it, won't we?
You cannot do enough for the far left.
Yeah.
You can never give them enough.
Yeah.
In the news today, the unions are talking about more strikes because they're saying these pay rises aren't enough. They're getting something like 8, 9, 10. The train drivers have got 14% or something like that. And they're going, it's not enough. You can't do enough for these people.
Yeah, yeah. So kind of that, I think that's what I'm talking about. I think when I look back on those times, there seemed to be a balance between the government, the people who were protesting against the government. There seemed to be civil liberties. And I'm feeling now... And you're supposed to relax as you get older, aren't you? But I'm feeling more tense. I know Anna, my wife, sorry I'm not allowed to say her name, but my wife, she gets very distressed. She said to me today, I think I need to stop looking at Twitter. She said, I'm worried that I'm looking at Twitter and I'm just seeing, I'm seeing things focused. And I said, well, you will see things focused, but it doesn't mean it's not happening. Mm. It doesn't mean this stuff isn't happening, and actually you're lucky to have Twitter because at least you're getting some visibility of what. And we talked last time with the one that was messed up about the fact that middle class people are being shoved more and more into an environment where they don't see the things that are happening. So they don't go near Piccadilly Gardens. They have private health clubs. They have all that. So they're existing in a little bubble of security, and they're kind of saying, I don't think anything's happening over there.
Yeah, they don't drink in with the spoons.
Yes.
They don't socialise with working class, or below that it's called the underclass. They don't know any of those people.
Yeah.
Live in safe houses, in safe neighbourhoods. They don't necessarily need a decent police force because there's no crime in their areas per se.
Yeah.
The richer you get, the more private security you have, so you
Correct.
don't need the police at all.
Yes.
And you middle class don't feel the pressure upon the working class. It's always the working class who pay for this. And these are called, we've talked about this before, these are called luxury beliefs.
Yes, yes.
So luxury beliefs are beliefs that you can have as a middle class, as rich people, that make you feel amazing. People then think you've got status because you can say, I'm for welcoming refugees, and that's fine. Well, those refugees do not bring any negativity to your life and your lifestyle because they don't live near you. And they're paid for by taxpayers, so public services all crumble. But you know what? You don't use public services. Correct. You're already in Bupa.
Yeah.
You've got your own police security. You send your children to private schools. None of these things affect you.
They don't impact on you at all.
They affect the working class.
Yeah.
But you saying those things make you sound a little bit like Gandhi, Mandela, as in, let's welcome everybody and we can all suffer together and we can all build a better world together. Well, you don't, that's how you may look, but you don't mean that.
Yeah.
You mean, well, my life won't be impacted, but I feel fantastic that I'm so compassionate and so tolerant.
Well, you made a very good point, and you said everybody now can wear Gucci, carry Gucci handbags, wear, I don't, whatever the suits are called.
Ray-Bans, sunglasses, Savile Row suits.
And even if you can't get the originals, you get good fakes. So the only way now to distinguish yourself as wealthy or within that bracket is these luxury beliefs. It's the same as slipping on a fur coat, isn't it? Except it's a metaphorical fur coat. Because I support refugees, whatever. Oh, what a fantastic person you are.
Yeah.
You've got the Gucci handbag and the Ray-Ban, but you've also support, what's that sign they have saying refugees welcome or whatever it is. So you can do that. At the end of the day, getting your Porsche or your Rolls Royce and head back to, not Rolls Royce, Range Rover, and head back to the leafy suburbs of Hale, can't you, basically? And I think that's because I've said, why are these people going on these marches when they're totally safe? We've talked about this before. They're doing it as a status symbol.
Absolutely. They're taking photos of themselves. It's all over social media. And who doesn't want to stop babies dying in Gaza? Everybody does. Yeah. Who doesn't want to stop the earth, being destroyed by pollution? So all these marches, these aren't controversial marches. These are what everybody agrees with. But you get some social status out of it.
Yeah.
And I read something else the other day. Have you heard of a guy called, I think it's Sad Gad? Yeah.
Gad Sad.
Gad Sad.
Yes. Yeah, he's good actually.
He's
really
very good. I've not watched much of his stuff, but I have seen some of it. And I read a few lines of something someone put on social media the other day. And he calls it compassionate suicide or empathetic suicide, something like that. And what he means is, we have a belief in the West now that's suicidal, and we are killing ourselves because we're empathetic. So allow more people to move here because I'm so compassionate, so empathetic on these people. But the more we're doing it, the more it's leading to our destruction. And he uses a metaphor that there's two tribes live opposite a river, and they can raid each other for resources.
On either side of the river.
Yeah, they can raid each other. But the only thing that stops them raiding each other is knowing that the people on the other side of the river will not allow them to come into their village, to rape, to murder, to steal, to kill their children, to rape their women and plunder. So because they know that they won't be allowed to do that without consequences, therefore they have to trade with each other. But he's saying, in the West now, and especially the UK, there's no consequences now. So people can come here and plunder and rape our children and steal and kill us. There's no need to worry about consequences because there is no consequences anymore now, because we just say, it's not your fault. It's not this culture's fault. Keep coming. We'll welcome you with open arms, hoping you'll murder me and my children last.
Yeah. Well, I think I mentioned this to you before, and we want to talk about Islam at some point, and I've been reading a lot about Islam, and there's a particular author I'm following, Raymond Ibrahim. I've sent you. I think I've sent you a clip of him before, right. But he said, and he goes around. He's Turkey. He's what's called a Coptic Christian.
Yep.
I don't know what that is, but it's a Christian. He's from Egypt originally.
Yeah, so that's where the Coptic Christians are a religious Christian sect in Egypt, and they're nearly all gone now.
Yes.
They're nearly all gone.
Yeah.
Murdered, killed,
Yeah.
pushed out of the country, nearly all gone.
Yeah. So he's an American citizen. He speaks with an American accent. Very articulate, very charismatic. He travels around and he's acutely aware then of the threat of Islam, what Islam has done to the West, what Islam is doing in the West. And he travels around the world talking, and he doesn't get very many followers, but he's very, very interesting. But one of his speeches there's two parts of this. His speech himself, which he talks about Islam and the West. And the second part, he was answering questions. And somebody said to him, well, what can we do about this? Or said, what's happening? And he said, and I thought it was really well phrased, he said, this is the first time in world history where one civilization has welcomed a hostile force, another hostile civilization, with open arms into its environment, basically. And he said it's unprecedented what's happening now. The welcoming of Islam, of Islamic traditions and everything like that into, and that's exactly what Gad Saad is talking about.
Empathetic suicide.
Yeah, we're welcoming, after centuries of fighting Islam, we've now opened our arms and said, come on in, guys, do what you've been wanting to do for the last 1300 years, basically. And it's happening, isn't it? That's
history is full of people who put others before their own host nation. We tend to call them traitors. History is full of people like that. You know, we've got stories about them. We actually know the names of some of them who will open the city gates for the enemy because the enemy say, we'll treat you well once we've conquered. Yeah. And this is a type of that mentality, that you're not getting on in your society, but if the enemy come, they may treat you better if you help them. Yeah. And you'll have a better chance of raising up the social status, being the puppet government, like the Vichy government in France. So there is a known coping mechanism here, a survival strategy. It's not good for the nation, it's good for certain individuals.
Well, I think we discussed this last time as well, and I think the left, the communists, and I'm going to start calling them I'm not going to call them left anymore, I'm going to call them the communists. I think you call them Marxist, don't you, or Marxist ideology. I just simply call them communists. The communists have welcomed the Islam and the Muslims into this country. Yep. And the reason they've done that is that will help them reach their aims. They don't care about the Muslims, by the way. No. The left don't care about the Muslims.
They want a revolution.
Yeah. So they're welcoming the immigrants, they're welcoming the Islam and the Muslims into this environment, because that will help them achieve their aims. Yes. Which is destroying society to the point where they can bring in communism.
And build a communist utopia. We've got an example of this in 1979 Iran. The revolution had been promoted by Marxist communists, funded by Soviet Union, and they decided to use this cleric called Khomeini to get some of the radical votes as well. And they used him thinking, once the revolution comes and we're in power and we've taken over the country, Khomeini, then we can just sideline. Khomeini had different ideas.
Yes, yeah.
And when the revolution came, he took power and he murdered all the communists and all the socialists and all the intellectuals and all the university professors, because he knew he'd use them.
Yeah. And that the reason that happened is because that's about Islam, isn't it? That's about the ideology of Islam, which regards the people, the communists, everything like that. They regard them as kafirs, or basically infidels, and the ultimate objective is for infidels to be gone, either to become subservient, pay the jizya, which is the basically toll, or basically be killed and got rid of. And I think in the same way, the communists in this country now, who are embracing Islam, pro-Palestine, all that jazz. Despite that, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, the left, which is all about the trans thing, it's all about, you know, gays, it's all about all that sort of stuff. Is stuff that the Muslim nation abhors and wants to get rid of, doesn't it? That's the point. And they're embracing it at the moment, the left, not seeing that if Islam does take a hold, if Sharia law does take a hold in this country. And by the way, I've been reflecting on this. I can't blame the Muslims for what they're doing in this country. They've been invited in, they've been given the opportunity, and they're just simply taking advantage of it. And why wouldn't you?
And been told for decades, don't change.
Yeah, don't
Your
change.
culture is just as valuable as our culture. Your religion is just as good as our religion. Don't change. Keep all your practices. Keep all the... And so they're just doing what they've been told to do. Not once have the immigrant communities in this country ever been told to integrate, ever been forced to assimilate. Does that happen?
So I think the Muslims or the Islam is doing what comes naturally. And what comes naturally is our ideology. And our ideology involves in both, because Islam ideology is it's not a religion, it's an ideology, is Islam. It embraces religion, but also an entire way of living, which is Sharia law, basically. So what they will want to do, and naturally why wouldn't they want to do it? Because they've been invited in, come in, as you say, behave exactly as you have been doing in country. Why wouldn't they want to say, well, we want Sharia law as well? And that's what they are saying, isn't it?
They are now,
They are saying that now. And you can't blame them, because they've been invited in to do that.
Yeah.
But that Sharia law, if it takes place, all the communists, all the identity politics and all that crap will be destroyed immediately if that ever happens.
And this always happens when there's a power grab. So this just isn't Islam. So when Lenin took over Russia, he killed all the opposition. And they were all communists and socialists.
Yeah.
They were just not his type of communist and socialist.
Yeah.
There's a good video online during the Black Lives Matter riots in America, and there's some white people in an apartment with Black Lives Matter posters in the window. A riot marches past, and they start clapping and waving at them through the window. Yeah, you go. Da, da, da. They see these white people start throwing bricks through the window, and one of them is screaming through the window at the rioters, "We're on your side, we support you," as the bricks are coming through the window.
Yes, exactly.
Because being pink and fluffy and having an empathetic suicidal trait does not save you, because when there's a power grab, you eliminate all your enemies.
Yes. And if Islam takes hold here, and if Sharia... And you're probably listening to me now thinking, is Lindsay gone insane now? But, there is a reality we're facing here that this could happen. This could happen. Islam basically invaded the Western society for over 800 years and got as far. And actually, I've only recently found out, they were actually off the coast of England in a small island called Lundy. Have you heard about this?
That wasn't Islam. That was
the
Barbary pirates.
Who were Muslims.
Yeah. Yes. But that had nothing to do with them invading the UK. That was their base for white slavery from.
But that's how far they got. That's what I'm saying. They got that far. Yeah. They got to France.
They got to France. They got to basically Vienna.
Yeah.
So
Islam has done this before. Yeah. It's gone really far, and it was only held back by the Crusaders, by the Christian forces.
Yep.
And it's interesting, isn't it? At the moment, the communists are embracing the Muslims because the Palestine thing and the anti-Israel thing, get the Jews or whatever. Do the communists understand that the people of Islam, the people they despise, who they call the people of the book, are not just Jews, they're also Christians. So it's kind of, it's turkeys voting for Christmas, this, isn't it?
This is a bit like Game of Thrones.
I don't watch that.
Game of Thrones.
I've heard it's good, but I've never watched it.
It's well worth watching. It's well worth watching. I enjoyed it. But it's all about power struggle. Everyone's using each other. Yeah. We know you're our enemy, but at this moment in time, we're going to use you so I can defeat a bigger enemy. And then once we defeated them, I'm going to wipe you off. It's swapping allegiances, swapping armies, swapping kings, killing kings because they're not popular. And that's what this is.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the communists have no affinity with Islam whatsoever.
Yeah.
They just know they're classing them as useful idiots at the moment, that we're going to use them as our foot soldiers. But people don't learn from history.
I think they are massively underestimating what they've invited in. That's what I think.
Of course they have. I don't think most people got no idea. But many of the people who are here, who are Muslims, are not a problem. It's a part of the ideology that's the problem. Christianity, 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years, was basically just the same. We conquered the world. We sent armies in. We slaughtered people. The only thing that Islam is missing is a Reformation, because they're still very similar to the Islam that came out of the Arabian deserts, which was a warlord, warring religion. That will change over time if we can help them have the Reformation that they need.
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting, because I think what Ibrahim says is there can't be that Reformation because the very essence of Islam is adhering to the book of Muhammad, basically. The behaviours of Muhammad have got to be adhered to as part of the process. So I think the Reformation is a lot harder in Islam than it is in...
I'm sure there will be.
It's the Hadith. It's called the Hadith,
yeah,
isn't it?
But I'm sure it can be changed, because this was the same problem we had with Christianity.
Yeah.
Where the Bible was the Word of God.
Yes.
And we would burn heretics, and we would kill people. We had the Spanish Inquisition. We invaded the Middle East with our crusades because we were trying to take Christianity back to the Holy Land. All these problems we've had in other religions, and we've come through it. Islam may be a harder nut to crack.
But I think that's a very interesting point, because I think you're right. That Christianity did used to be like that, which when it was kind of hardcore. But then you just talked about Iran in the 70s, didn't you? If you look back at videos of Iran, Syria, places like this in the 70s, the women were wearing dresses, suits, the men were wearing suits. It was kind of, and colonialism had actually reduced the impact of Islam. Islam was starting to become more moderate at that point. It was only after, as you say, after the revolution in 79 that it went back to people, hijabs and all that jazz as well, wasn't it?
You're right. In the 70s, radical Islam really kicked off.
Yes.
You look at Egypt now, most people wear the burqa now in Egypt. When I was there 20, 30 years ago, no one had the burqa on.
Yeah.
There's photos from Kabul in the 70s that looked like, a Western country. It's radical Islam that's the problem, not necessarily Islam or Muslims themselves. But the weakness of the West has allowed radical Islam to gain ground and fueling it with some of the wars, but also the fact that they're never being challenged. So many of the Muslims in this country came here to escape radical Islam, to escape the poverty of the Muslim world, and came here. But then we allowed some of them to bring radical Islam with them, and we never challenged that. And if this country falls to radical Islam, which not a chance in hell it will, but if it did fall to radical Islam,
I'm not sure.
And many of those Muslim people and many of those Muslim families will then flee this country to go somewhere else away from radical Islam.
Texas,
And so we need to challenge and stop radical Islam, and that's a fight easily won, because lots of Muslims don't want it. But those Muslims are silent at the moment in this country because there's no support for them. Because every time we want a community leader on TV, we get the imam, we get the radical Muslim on TV talking about stuff. Our country, our leaders, our government always ignore the moderate Muslim voices. We go straight to the radicals, and we need to shame the radicals. We need to do what we did with the IRA. You're not allowed on TV. And we need to start spending money and promoting the moderate Muslim voices for them to start sorting out their communities, for them to sort out the radicals from their communities. But at the moment, they have no tools, they have no voice, they get no support. And they're left on their own, in which case they're terrified of these radical nutcases themselves. So they go along with it all because they'll be killed as well.
Well, I'm going to challenge you here, because you said something there very quickly and moved on, and you said there's not a chance in hell that Islam will take over or in this country. And I think my question, and I'll first of all, before you respond, I'll just refer you back to J.D. Vance, who's the running mate of Trump. And he made a joke, didn't he? And we've already mentioned it here, but I'll mention it again. He made a joke at the Republican convention. He said, we've been worrying about which Muslim country will be the first to have a nuclear weapon. It used to be Iran. It now could be Palestine. I can't remember what he said. Yeah. He said, but now actually we're now concerned it could be Britain, Great Britain.
Well, he said it is Britain.
It is Britain. It is Britain. Now they've got a Labour, a left wing. Yeah. And it was a joke, and I get it was a joke.
That was a joke to hurt the Labour government.
Yes,
this country, it was a slap in the face to Keir Starmer and his government. That's what that was.
But there's no smoke without fire, is there? Now,
lots of smoke without fire when it comes to politicians.
The perception over the pond is that Islam is getting a hold in this country.
Well, to a certain extent, it is.
Yeah.
But
but then I'll just take you a little bit further. If you look at what Islam achieved between the 8th century and I think the 1300s, up to the point, the last battle in Europe or whatever, the amount of land they dominated that went from being Christian to Muslim, because people are under the impression, aren't they, that Egypt, Syria, Palestine were all Muslim places. And and one of the interesting things, isn't it, people say, when Christians have been persecuted in these countries, Armenia, or all this persecution, and people say, oh well, they shouldn't be there then, it should be Christians. But the reason they're there is because they were there first. Yeah. They were there first. And Islam took over, and the Muslims took over. So they have been incredibly successful, the Muslims. Islam has been incredibly successful in taking land from the Christians over time and got pretty far into Europe. Well, they were in Spain for 800 years. Yep. They dominated Spain for 800 years, something like that. So when you say that there's not a chance of that happening in the UK, why, given that track record, would you say that? Because they're on the march again, aren't they?
They are. You just have to look at the history of Islam. It was easy for them to conquer North Africa, which again was all Christian at the time, because at that point then, technology was basically equal. It was all the sword, and they had a warrior religion. So people fought hard because if I die, I'm going to go see God and get 70 virgins. Europe was coming out of the Dark Ages. We weren't organised. But let's roll forward now. Islam as a political ideology is a failed ideology. You just have to look at every Muslim country in the world. Nobody wants to live in any of them. Nobody's forcing and emigrating into any of these countries. They're failed states, most of them. So they haven't got the ability to conquer the West now. They've only managed to get where they are now in the West down to weak leadership of the West. That's changing. That's going to change and harden even more so over the next 10, 20 years. The Muslim population in the UK at the moment is 6%. 6%.
That's a lot.
No, it's a lot, but they will not be taking over the UK with 6%.
No.
This country over the next decade will get a grip on radical Islam, will get a grip on mass migration, and that'll basically be the end then of radical Islam in the UK. Europe will be looking at doing the same. It's going to be
fair, we are seeing it happen in Europe now.
It's going to be tough for many, many moderate Muslims in Europe over the next 10, 20 years, because it's hard to distinguish between a moderate Muslim and a radical Muslim, because most radicals will tell you I'm moderate when some of these changes start happening.
Well, that's something when we talk about Islam and the history of Islam, I was going to talk about that, because there's two types of Muslim faces or Islamic faces. One is the Mecca face and one is the Medina face. The Mecca face was the initial part of Muhammad's creation of his ideology, the first 10 years where it was a passive and peaceful process. It was after those 10 years when he went to Medina that he became the warlord and the aggressive bit. So radical Muslims, when it suits, if they've got to present a face, they'll present the Mecca face. And this is the point you said, right? Yeah, whatever. The Medina phase is the actual one that actually has superiority over the Mecca phase, but they will use the Mecca face to present something. Islam is peace and all that jazz, basically. So that does happen. Yeah,
I'm sure that does. So basically, some Muslims are liars, aren't we all?
Yeah,
aren't we all deceitful? Aren't we all?
Well, they're not lying technically, because they're saying this is the word of Muhammad at this point here. What they're not saying is, but actually later on it became. That's what they're saying.
Yeah. So I'm not too worried about that. All we need is strong leadership, better politicians, and all these problems can be fixed.
Yeah.
People say that Islam is not compatible with UK life. It is. Radical Islam isn't, but radical anything isn't acceptable in the UK. We just need to get a grip on it, and we've not got a grip on it because of cowardice.
I don't think Islam is compatible with UK life, and the reason that I'm saying that is not because I'm being Islamophobic. Yeah. It's because Islam is more than just a religion. It's an ideology. It's a way of life.
Not to all of them.
No, but the true embracing of Islam is that it's an ideology. It's not just here's a religion. Because if it was just a religion, it wouldn't be a problem, would it? Their religion is more of an ideology. It pervades the way you live and the laws you follow and the way you behave as well. That's why it's not compatible with the UK. But I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's just a religion. It's a way of life is Islam. It's a combination of a religion and behaving with an idea, you've got to behave as Muhammad behaves. That's what the reality of Islam is.
I don't know what that pinging was then. I actually think it might be one of these springs just pinged.
Yeah, well, as you can see, gentle listeners, this is the technology that's stopping this thing falling over again.
Sellotape.
A piece of sellotape holding it on.
Yeah. What you said then is the true nature of Islam,
yes.
How many people interpret it, but that's not how many Muslims in the West interpret it.
Oh, correct. No, I think you're right. I think a lot of Muslims don't really understand, with the greatest of respect to Muslims, don't understand what Islam really is. Yeah, and I think you're right.
And if we go on a really good PR offensive,
yes,
we can wipe out radical Islam definitely from the UK.
Yeah.
And all you're left then are with peaceful Muslims who want to get on in life, who love the country, who just happen to pray to a different God to some other people.
So
that's a success.
Yeah. What you're saying is you think it's possible if you can kind of compress the Muslims back to just the religious part of Islam. That's what you're saying, isn't it, really?
I don't think we have to compress that because I think they want to do that themselves.
Yeah.
What we have to do is support them to do it.
Okay, that's interesting. We were talking about Sam Kidd when we started this one.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to talk about with Sam Kidd is racism and racism. So again, in the 70s and 80s, and I'm a brown man, I experienced some racism at school, but I would genuinely say through the 80s and possibly most of the 90s, I didn't experience any racism and became, I think I've told you this before, Nick, I started to believe I started to believe I was white, basically, because my race and my colour was never mentioned by anybody. And that, I think in the 80s and 90s, it was a very liberal time. There was very little racism around. There was racism, of course, there's always racism and everything, but that word racism and racist has come back with a vengeance into this century and this last decade. And we are called racist all the time for all sorts of things. Yeah. And I was watching something on YouTube, and somebody was saying it's not racist, and I actually thought, it's not racist. A lot of the things people would call racist. So I wrote something down. I sent it to you. I'd just like to, if you don't mind, read that out now. And this section's called "It's Not Racist." It's not racist to want to stop uncontrolled immigration into your country. It's not racist to want your family and your children to be safe in your community. It is not racist to protest on the streets when our children are being murdered and nothing is done about it. It's not racist to show your anger when your government protects other religions and races over your own. It's not racist to protest when white British people are jailed simply because of the colour of their skin. It's not racist to criticise and challenge a religion that undermines the very principles our country was built on. It's not racist to complain when your taxes are used against your wishes to pay for housing illegal immigrants from other countries. And it's not racist to be proud of and defend your national identity and culture. Do you agree with most of those?
I got all of them.
Yeah.
None of that is racist.
Yeah.
But the word racist doesn't mean what we think it means now. The meaning of the word racist has completely changed. So when we're having arguments with people about racism, we're not arguing the same thing. And that's why we don't get to an agreement, because the words we're using have changed. So we think racism is about persecuting people because of their race or disadvantaging them by withholding jobs or money or services or opportunities. That's what I think racism is.
Yeah.
But on the left now in this country, that's not all that's racist. Racist is being white and having power. So many people now say black people can't be racist in the UK because we have no power. It's prejudice with power. And what is that noise?
It might be my phone.
Oh, no, don't leave it. No, don't believe it. It's only going to... so that's what they say, basically. It's prejudice with power. So because black people, brown people, gay people, women, all those people don't have power because only white straight men have power in the West, they can't be racist. Now, that's all the bollocks. We know that to be true. But the word racist is a powerful word, as in nobody wants to be called racist. 100 years ago, nobody wanted to be called a heretic. Because you could, even in Islam now, you get killed for being called a heretic.
Yeah.
And that used to happen in this country. Heretic would burn people 300-400 years ago. Still a Christian, but you're a Catholic Christian, not a Protestant Christian. So people want a word to beat people up with, and racism is the most powerful word for that. But there's other words that have come along now, such as homophobic, such as transphobic, and then a good one, Islamophobic. Islamophobic was invented by, I think it was the Muslim Brotherhood in the 80s. And the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist organisation in most Muslim countries. And they saw the word racism and saw the power that had on the white middle class in the West. And they said, we need a word like that we can attack white liberals with, so radical Islam can get an easier ride. And they came up with Islamophobia. Islam is an ideology, it's an idea. Of course you can criticise an idea, but they didn't want that. So they came up with the word Islamophobic, and that might get even more powerful in the UK if the Labour government start passing laws about Islamophobia. But that's all racism is now. It's a word you call your enemies, but it's losing power.
I think that's the point. You mentioned this before. It's been bandied about so much, and certainly by this bloody government at the moment, that people just are ignoring it now because it's just...
Last 10 years it's been overused, and if you're reading now someone's been called a racist, I just carry on reading them because I know in 99% of the time that's not true.
Yeah.
Homophobic, I don't even pay attention to that because 99 times out of 100 it's not true.
Yes.
So therefore we stop taking notice of those words.
Yeah.
And the only people who benefit from that are the racists.
Yeah. I think there's an interesting truth there, isn't there? So that Jermaine Janus guy who got sacked or suspended for text, as soon as that thing came out, and I think you and I talked about this, and I felt as soon as it came out, I immediately thought, I bet he's done nothing. Yes. I bet his texts are absolutely, and I think that turned out to be the case. The texts he sent were totally, just innocent little jokey texts. It wasn't pictures of his bottom or anything like that. And I think people are now reading articles about racism or he's being sacked for sexism or whatever. It's even when you hear about cases of somebody being sacked for inappropriate behaviour. When you read about the actual inappropriate behaviour, it's like somebody might have rested his hand on a woman's shoulder or something like that. It's like, is that inappropriate behaviour? And all these things have been so sensitised that people are now starting to ignore them, aren't they, I think?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that footballer, Janus guy, he was trying to flirt with women he worked with.
Yeah.
Because he probably wanted sex.
Yeah.
He may be a married man.
Yeah.
But he wanted sex. So how else do men approach women?
No, I was going to say, is there anything wrong with that? I don't know. Yeah.
Women are now complaining throughout the West, especially in the UK and America, that they're finding it harder and harder and harder to meet men and get dates. Yeah. Because men have stopped approaching women. Yeah. Because why would you approach a woman now? Because A, she's going to call you a creep and that you're hitting on her. Well, you are hitting on her because it's men's role to make the first approach. Yeah. And then if you can't do it at work now, because if she complains about you, you can lose your job.
Correct, yeah.
So men now have stopped approaching women and asking women on dates or complimenting women because, she'll complain to HR. He said that dress looked nice on me. He's a pervert. Yeah. Well, how else do men make approaches to women? Yeah. Women are killing the date. Have killed the dating market.
But I mean, when I go around our businesses, if there's a female director or whatever, normally I haven't seen them for a while, I'll give them a little kiss on the cheek, which is used to be a thing that men, but now I'm actually hesitating and thinking, can I do this anymore?
No, you can't. especially physical contact like that. No, you can't.
Yeah, but
because she can use that. Yeah. So she can class that as constructive dismissal.
But it's not a sexual thing. It's a way that you greet a woman, isn't it? That you've not seen for a while. That you haven't.
Not today in
I think
this
that's
environment.
Outrageous.
Well, it is outrageous, but you're putting yourself at risk. So therefore, she ends up handing her a notice in, claiming unfair dismissal, constructive dismissal from you.
Yeah.
Because you.
But I'm not using tongues or anything.
You kept sexually harassing her at work. Now, if that gets to a court and with the right judge, you're paying out for that.
Well, I don't do this stuff. I'm going to carry. It's just. I mean, in France, that's the way that men greet women. Yeah. Isn't it? Yeah. So, but now you can't do it anymore.
Yeah, but you're not French.
No, that's true.
You're not French.
I'm not French. Non. Je ne suis française.
Yeah. But this is where this nonsense have got us, that we're now afraid of each other. Yeah. We've got men afraid of women because what are they going to say? That's why I can't approach them. We've got, Christians afraid of Muslims. We've got gays afraid of straights. I always keep going back to we're splitting into tribes, and we're scared of each other because we're seeing them as the other instead of being the same.
But also, what is wrong with having a relationship with somebody at work if you're a single? I mean, I'm saying you're a single man. When I was in the firms when I was a chartered accountant in the 90s, loads of the married partners were having affairs with other married people within the firm. I didn't realise till after I left actually. But this was a thing, and then there were lots of relationships in the firm as well.
A couple of decades ago, I think I read something like 70% of all relationships were started at work.
And why not?
Or through work, because that's how you'd meet people.
And why not? You're with people, you get to know people quite well, you're spending a lot of time with people, you're having social events with people after work.
But then
why?
The feminists put a stop to that, because the feminists were saying this is about power plays by men, because it's more likely a man will be the boss, so therefore he's using his influence, his power to subjugate women and make them go on dates. So then we started suing people.
That's one of the perks of power. Sorry, go
on. But now that's why so many people are single. That's why so many women now are single and buying
because men
cats.
won't go anywhere near them.
Because men won't go in. That's why so many men are. I mean, this is why we're ruining relationships. This is one of the reasons why we're ruining society. Yeah. Because we're putting more and more barriers in front of people to meet, to get married, to have families. And these are just an extra barrier we're doing in the West to destroy people. Did you enjoy that video? I think you did. Come on now, hit that bell, subscribe, comment. Let's build this channel. I need more followers. I need more subscribers. Be part of the journey. See you soon.